Usually when we think about the animals that live alongside us, we picture this very clear, almost engineered blueprint of domestication.
Right.
Like you look at a golden retriever or, I don't know, a Holstein cow, and you see exactly what thousands of years of human design can achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very intentional.
Yeah, we took a wild animal and we fundamentally remade it. The blueprint is obvious. You throw a ball, the dog brings it back, it's clean, it's predictable, and, makes sense.
It does.
But then you look at the cat sleeping on your lap, and suddenly that blueprint is completely thrown out the window.
Oh, totally out the window.
We're looking at a relationship that is, well, honestly, it's a profound mystery.
It really is. It's the absolute definition of an evolutionary paradox. I mean, we have this animal living in our homes, sleeping on our pillows, that looks and acts remarkably like a wild apex predator.
Because it basically is one.
Exactly. Biologically speaking, it still is one.
And that is exactly what we're exploring today. So, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack the incredible 60 million year evolutionary journey of the domestic cat.
Which is just a massive timeline.
It's huge. We're going to figure out how a completely solitary, highly specialized killer ended up purring on our couches.
It's a great mission.
Right. And to do this, we're pulling from a fantastic stack of sources. We've got extensive excerpts from Dr. Sarah Brown's books, The Hidden Language of Cats and the Cat, A Natural and Cultural History.
Both phenomenal resources, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Really incredible detail in those. We're also drawing on some deep behavioral insights from Psychology Today, and we're looking at environmental enrichment through a really fascinating review on the Danteism's conservation blog.
Yeah, that one is super practical for people with cats at home.
Definitely. And we even have some real-world community reactions from readers of the Purrington Post.
It's an incredibly rich collection of material, and what I love about these sources is how they span everything from deep paleontology all the way to the modern psychology of pet ownership. It paints a really complete picture.
It does. But the thing that really stands out to me, like the core tension of all this research, is that despite the fact that cats have lived alongside humans for something like 10,000 years, there is a very real, very vibrant scientific debate about whether they are actually domesticated at all.
Right.
At least not in the way we traditionally understand the word.
Yeah, exactly. The word domesticated carries this massive amount of scientific baggage. It implies a certain level of human control and biological surrender.
And cats simply refuse to carry that baggage.
Oh, they entirely refuse.
Which is why I am so glad you're here to guide us through this. You are the ultimate translator for connecting the dots between feline biology, history, and psychology.
Well, I'm excited to dive in.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Let's start at the very beginning. To understand the animal that is currently shedding all over your favorite sweater, we have to travel back in deep time.
Deep, deep time.
Right. We need to see where this physical blueprint was originally drafted. And the story doesn't begin in ancient Egypt. It begins way back 60 million years ago. We are talking about a creature called myasis.
Myasis is a phenomenal starting point. If you want to picture the world 60 million years ago, you have to completely forget open grasslands.
Okay, so no savannas.
No, not at all. Think of a dense, humid, ancient forest covering parts of what is now North America and Eurasia. The dinosaurs are gone, right?
Okay.
And mammals are just starting to experiment with these new ecological niches.
Wow, okay.
Now, myasis didn't look much like today's cats. If you saw one, you'd probably think it was a modern-day marten or, maybe a weasel.
Like a ferret kind of thing.
Yeah, sort of. It had a long, low-slung body, very short legs, and a long tail for balance in the trees.
So it's scurrying around in the branches. But what makes this specific weasel-like creature the great-grandfather of the cat?
It's all about its teeth. Myasis is actually the common ancestor for all of the order Carnivora.
Oh, wait, all of them.
All of them. So not just cats, but dogs, bears, hyenas, raccoons. They all trace back to this little tree dweller. And the reason is that myasis possessed an early evolutionary prototype of something called carnassials.
Carnassials. Okay, yeah, I've seen that term in the readings. These are the shearing teeth, right?
Precisely. Before this point, mammalian teeth were mostly designed for grinding. Crushing up insects, mashing plant matter.
Right, flat teeth.
Yeah, but carnassials are different. They are essentially a modified premolar and molar that align to pass by each other closely, exactly like the blades of a pair of scissors.
Wow.
They are designed exclusively to shear through meat and tendon. This development was the defining evolutionary fork in the road. It basically set the stage for all modern meat-eating mammals.
Okay, so we have Miaces 60 million years ago as this sort of foundational prototype. It figures out the whole scissor teeth thing.
Right.
But from there, I mean, evolution is a slow, iterative process. Fast forward a massive 30 million years, and the blueprint gets a major upgrade. The sources bring us to a creature called Proelurus, which literally translates to before the cat.
Yes, and Proelurus is where things start to look much more recognizable to us as feline. It's still a forest dweller, maybe weighing about 20 pounds, but its teeth have become even more specialized for exclusively eating meat.
So it's getting more dialed in.
Exactly. But the massive leap forward here is the claws. Proelurus developed retractable claws.
Which sounds simple, but mechanically, that's a huge advantage, isn't it?
It's an immense advantage. I mean, think about a dog or a wolf. Their claws are always out.
Right, you can hear them clicking on the floor.
Exactly. They get worn down constantly by rubbing against the ground. They act more like cleats for running. But because Proelurus could sheathe its claws, it kept them razor sharp.
Oh, because they're protected.
Yes. When it was down on the forest floor, the claws were tucked away. But when it needed to climb a tree to escape a larger predator or, grapple with prey, it could instantly deploy these perfect, sharp hooks.
But the readings mention that Proelurus still had a bit of an awkward gait, like it was plantigrade.
Right, plantigrade. That means it walked flat on the soles of its feet with its heel touching the ground.
Like we do.
Yeah, humans are plantigrade, bears are plantigrade. It's great for stability, but it's not exactly stealthy, and it really limits your top speed.
Which brings us to the next massive upgrade. Jump forward another 10 million years, or around 20 million years ago now, and we get Pseudolurus, or the false cat.
Yeah, Pseudolurus.
And physically speaking, this is the animal that really nails the landing. Because it isn't flat-footed anymore. It is completely digigrade. It walks entirely on its toes.
Walking on the toes is an absolute game changer for a predator. First, it lengthens the leg, which instantly increases stride length and allows for incredibly rapid acceleration.
Like a sprinter on their tiptoes.
Exactly. But more importantly, for a stalk and ambush predator, it vastly reduces the surface area of the foot hitting the ground. Less surface area means less noise.
So it's way quieter.
You're silent. Pseudolurus was so perfectly adapted, so lethal and efficient, that it began to spread far beyond those dense ancestral forests.
And the timing was perfect because the Earth's geography was shifting, right?
Yeah.
The sources note that sea levels dropped significantly during this era, creating these massive temporary land bridges.
Right, like across the Bering Strait.
Exactly. So Pseudolurus uses those bridges across the Bering Strait and the Red Sea to basically conquer North America and Africa. The way I was visualizing this entire timeline from the readings is like looking at an ancient tech company.
A tech company, I like that. How so?
Well, think about it. Mythology is the original startup in a garage 60 million years ago. They invent the core technology, the shearing teeth. Over millions of years, the company grows, and they keep spinning off these highly specialized tech divisions to see what works. And some of those divisions produce incredible, flashy products that eventually go spectacularly bankrupt.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
I'm thinking specifically about the saber-toothed cats, the Smilodon, because they branch off around this time, right?
They do, yes. The Macaradontinae subfamily, which includes the famous saber-tooths, they are the perfect example of an evolutionary spin-off that became way too specialized for its own good.
They were massive, right?
Oh, Smilodon was an absolute unit of an apex predator dominating the Americas until roughly 10,000 years ago. And their physical adaptations were terrifyingly impressive.
The stat that blew my mind in Dr. Brown's book was the jaw. They could open their jaws to a 120-degree angle.
It's absurd.
That is absurd. Like, a modern house cat or even a lion can't do anything close to that.
Not even close. A modern lion tops out at around 65 degrees. Smilodon absolutely needed that massive 120-degree gape because its upper canine teeth were so enormously elongated, up to 11 inches long in some species.
11 inches.
Yeah. If they couldn't open their mouths that wide, the teeth would literally block food from entering their mouths.
But wait, if they had these massive swords in their mouth, how do they actually hunt? Because I always pictured them just biting down and crunching through bone. But wouldn't those long teeth snap?
That's exactly the issue, and it's why that 120-degree gape is so crucial. The leading paleontological theory is that they were ambush predators with a very specific precision killing method.
Okay.
Their bite force was actually surprisingly weak compared to a modern lion. Instead of a crushing bite, they relied on immensely powerful neck and shoulder muscles.
So they weren't biting through bone.
No. They would wrestle a large, slow-moving herbivore to the ground, pin it down completely, and then open that massive jaw. They'd use those strong neck muscles to essentially drive the sabers deep into the prey's throat, severing the jugular and the windpipe in one clean strike, and then just wait for it to bleed out.
It's like an assassin's dagger.
Exactly.
But as you mentioned, there was a fatal flaw in that specialized tech.
Yes. The saber teeth were incredibly brittle. If a smilodon struck bone, or if the prey was still thrashing and twisted violently, the tooth could easily snap.
Oh, man.
And once an adult tooth was broken, it never grew back. As the Ice Age ended and the climate changed, the massive, slow-moving megafauna, the perfect targets for that precision throat strike, began to die out.
Right, the mammoths and stuff.
Yeah. They were replaced by smaller, faster, more agile prey. So the saber-tooth's highly specialized toolkit suddenly became a massive liability. They couldn't catch the new prey, and if they tried, their brittle teeth were too prone to breaking in a messy struggle. And so, the flashy tech division goes bankrupt, they went extinct.
But the main company, the original lineage, survives because they didn't overspecialize. They kept iterating on the core, adaptable consumer model. And that leads us to the Felis lineage.
Right, if we connect this to the bigger picture.
Yeah. The sources mention a massive 2007 DNA study that really locked down exactly how this family tree took shape.
Yes, that 2007 study was an absolute watershed moment in evolutionary biology. For a long time, the cat family tree was a bit of a mess because their skeletons are also similar. It's hard to tell them apart in the fossil record.
Because they're basically built the same.
Exactly. But this study analyzed 30 different genes across all living cat species. It organized the 40 modern wild species into exactly 8 distinct lineages, mapping the exact order in which these groups branched off from that common pseudolorus ancestor.
And the very last group to branch off.
The very last group, arriving on the evolutionary scene roughly 3.4 million years ago, was the Felis lineage. This group includes various small, highly adaptable wildcats spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa.
And eventually, it includes the domestic cat, the animal that currently cries if you buy the wrong brand of pate.
Exactly. But what this deep time perspective reveals is profound. By the time Homo sapiens even existed, by the time humans were just starting to figure out how to strike 2 rocks together to make a spark, the cat's physical design was already finished.
That's incredible.
Its anatomy, its perfect digitigrade stealth, its highly efficient dentition, its solitary hunting prowess, it had already been field-tested and perfected over millions of years across multiple continents. They were incredibly successful survivors long before we ever entered the picture.
Which brings us perfectly to the next major question. Having established this Felis lineage, how exactly did one specific branch transition from a completely wild, independent, perfect predator into a household companion?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, because this is where the domestication debate gets really intense. Reading through Dr. Sarah Brown's book, she makes it very clear that we have to understand the difference between taming and domestication. They are not synonyms.
They absolutely are not, and conflating the two is where a lot of misunderstandings happen. Taming is a behavioral modification that happens to a single individual during its lifetime.
Like training.
Yes. You can take a wild animal, say a tiger cub or a young raccoon, and handle it constantly from a very young age. It might become biddable, it might tolerate your presence, it might even be affectionate toward you.
Right.
But its underlying genetics haven't changed one bit. If that tamed raccoon has babies, those babies will be 100% wild.
Right. You haven't changed the blueprint, you've just trained the animal.
Exactly. Domestication, on the other hand, is a profound population-level genetic change. It takes place over many, many generations.
Okay.
It happens when humans actively control an animal's reproduction, selectively breeding individuals for specific desirable traits like a cow that produces more milk, a sheep with thicker wool, or a dog that is docile and eager to follow human commands. This selective breeding physically and genetically alters the entire species over time.
Now, to explain just how dramatic domestication can be, the sources reference one of the most famous and honestly most fascinating biological studies of all time, Dmitry Belyev's silver fox experiments.
Oh, yes.
This started in Siberia in the late 1950s, right?
Yes, Belyev's work is legendary. He essentially wanted to recreate the domestication of the dog in real time to understand the mechanics of it. He took captive silver foxes from fur farms.
And these were wild foxes.
Completely wild, highly aggressive, and terrified of humans. Belyev instituted an incredibly simple rule. He would only breed the foxes that were the least reactive to human presence, not the friendly ones, just the ones that didn't immediately try to bite the cage.
Just selecting for a slightly lower flight or fight response.
Exactly. He bred them together. Then he took their offspring, tested them, and again only bred the absolute calmest of the bunch. He didn't train them. He didn't tame them.
You just picked the chillest ones.
Yes. He just selectively bred for one trait, low aggression. And the results were staggering. After just 10 generations, which is a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, he had foxes that were actively seeking out human attention.
Wow.
They were whimpering for affection, wagging their tails, and licking the researchers' hands, just like golden retrievers.
Which is incredible on a behavioral level.
Right.
But the really wild part is what happened to their physical bodies.
Right.
Just by breeding for friendliness, these foxes started developing what scientists call domestication syndrome.
Yes. Domestication syndrome describes a suite of physical characteristics that almost always seem to appear as a byproduct when we breed mammals for tameness.
Like what?
Well, these friendly silver foxes suddenly started being born with floppy ears. Their tails became shorter and curled over their backs. Their coats lost the solid wild coloration, became piebald or spotted.
That's correct.
And internally, their brains shrank and their baseline stress hormone levels plummeted. We see this exact same syndrome across many domesticated species: cows, pigs, dogs, sheep. They all retain juvenile, almost puppy-like physical features well into adulthood.
I have to ask, why does that happen? Why would breeding an animal to be nice to humans make its ears go floppy?
It's a brilliant question, and it all comes down to something called neural crest cells.
Neural crest cells.
Yes, these are special stem cells present during embryonic development. As the embryo grows, these neural crest cells migrate throughout the body to form various tissues. Now, one of the things they form are the adrenal glands, which produce adrenaline and govern the fight-or-flight response.
Okay, I'm following.
When Belyaev selected foxes with low aggression, he was essentially selecting foxes with delayed or reduced neural crest cell migration. But here's the catch. Those same neural crest cells are also responsible for forming ear cartilage, jaw bones, and pigmentation cells.
Oh, wow. So if you accidentally delay the cells to lower the adrenaline, you don't get enough cells reaching the ears. So the cartilage is weak and the ear flops over.
Exactly. And not enough cells reach the skin, so you get unpigmented white spots on the coat. It's all genetically linked. You pull the thread of tameness, and the entire physical structure changes.
Okay, so take that understanding and look at the domestic cat sitting on the rug. They don't have floppy ears. They don't have curly tails. Aside from some modern coat color variations and slightly shorter legs, they look practically identical to a wildcat.
Absolutely.
And we certainly never controlled their breeding the way we did with dogs or cows. Which really begs the question, how on earth did they get into our houses in the first place if we didn't domesticate them?
To answer that, we have to look back to the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, roughly 10,000 years ago. This period marks a monumental shift in human history, the agricultural revolution.
When we started farming.
Right. For the first time, large groups of humans stopped being nomadic hunter-gatherers. We settled down. We planted crops. And most importantly, we built granaries to store our massive surpluses of grain.
And let me guess, wherever humans stockpile thousands of pounds of grain, you immediately get millions of mice and rats.
Precisely. It was a rodent population boom unlike anything the natural world had ever seen. Now, living in the exact same region, hunting in the scrublands around these new human settlements, was a specific subspecies of wildcat. Felis libica, the North African wildcat.
And they look at this human granary and see a completely free, all-you-can-eat buffet.
It was an absolute paradise for a small predator. The wildcats that were bold enough, or perhaps just hungry enough, to tolerate the scary sights and sounds of the human village got access to an endless supply of fat, grain-fed mice. And humans, who were terrified of losing their winter food supply to rodents, quickly realized that these little wildcats were highly effective exterminators. So a commensal relationship began.
Mutual benefit.
Exactly. We didn't pen them up or selectively breed them. The cats simply moved in. The individual cats that were naturally a little less fearful of humans got the most food, survived longer, and raised more kittens in the barns. Over thousands of years, they self-selected for tolerance to humans.
And the genetics completely back this up. That 2007 DNA study we mentioned earlier proved that every single modern domestic cat, whether it's a stray alley cat in New York, a barn cat in France, or a pampered purebred Persian in Tokyo, descends from this one specific wildcat subspecies, Felis libica.
Every single one.
But looking at this evidence, I have to push back a little on the terminology. Are cats actually domesticated at all? I mean, look at the world today. There are millions of unowned feral cats living entirely independently of humans.
Yes, there are.
They hunt, they establish territories, they breed, they survive perfectly fine in forests and alleys. It honestly feels like they just view us as large, clumsy, two-legged cats with a remarkably poor sense of soul who happen to open cans for them.
It's a very valid challenge, and it's exactly why many scientists, including the researchers cited in our sources, prefer to classify cats as semi-domesticated.
Semi-domesticated, okay.
Yeah. Unlike dogs or horses, humans rarely directed their evolutionary path. For 99% of our shared history, we didn't breed cats to be better companions or have softer fur. We just let them hang around the barns because they killed pests. So they changed just enough to tolerate our presence.
What actually changed physically then? Anything?
Very little. Their brains are about 25% smaller than their wildcat ancestors, which, as we saw with Belaev's foxes, is linked to a reduced fear and aggression response.
Okay.
And their intestines are slightly longer, which is a subtle adaptation that allows them to more efficiently digest the carbohydrate-rich human food scraps they occasionally scavenged. But aside from that, nothing.
Nothing at all.
They kept their wild predatory toolkit entirely intact. They never lost the instinct or the physical capability to survive completely without us.
That is just brilliant. They literally walked into human civilization, negotiated a housing contract where they pay rent in dead mice, and completely refused to change anything else about themselves.
Pretty much.
And once they secured their place in those ancient granaries, they realized humans had invented something else they wanted to take advantage of, which is global transportation.
Yes.
Which leads us to our next section. The feline takeover.
Yes, the global spread of the cat is inextricably linked to human trade, maritime exploration, and agriculture. And perhaps the most complex, fascinating early chapter of this story takes place in ancient Egypt.
The Egyptian relationship with cats is wild. It is a mass of contradictions.
Oh, absolutely.
On the one hand, reading the sources, they absolutely revered them. They literally deified them. You had Bastet, the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and the home, who was depicted with the head of a cat.
Right.
Families kept felines as pampered, beloved pets. The sources mention that if a family's pet cat died of natural causes, the entire household would shave their eyebrows as a public display of mourning. And killing a cat, even accidentally, was a crime punishable by death.
It was a profound, legally codified level of cultural reverence. But, as you noted, there is a very dark, deeply contradictory side to this history.
Yeah, I was shocked reading this part.
At the exact same time citizens were shaving their eyebrows in mourning for their pets, the Egyptian religious elite were running massive, industrialized temple catteries. They were mass breeding cats by the thousands solely for the purpose of ritually sacrificing them at a very young age, often by snapping their necks, mummifying them, and selling them to religious pilgrims to use as offerings to Bastet.
It's such a staggering paradox. You have pampered family members sleeping on beds on one side of the city and industrialized sacrificial breeding programs on the other.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
But despite this intense, complicated focus on cats, the Egyptians actually placed a strict ban on their export. They considered them a protected national resource. They wanted to keep them all, which of course didn't work at all because enter the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians. They were the great maritime traders of the ancient Mediterranean world. And above all else, they were notoriously practical.
Right.
If you think about it, a wooden trading ship loaded with cargo, especially grain or textiles, is an absolute paradise for rodents. And rodents are the bane of a sailor's existence. They destroy the cargo, they eat the crew's rations, and they spread devastating diseases.
It's a huge problem.
So the Phoenicians looked at the Egyptian cats and realized they were the perfect biological solution to shipboard pests. So they simply ignored the ban, smuggled the cats out of Egypt, and put them to work on their ships.
And this is where the cat's biology makes them the ultimate historical hitchhikers. Because human sailors during this era were constantly battling scurvy, right?
Yes, scurvy was awful.
The lack of vitamin C from fresh produce on long sea voyages was a death sentence. But the cats on board were totally fine. I read that they didn't need oranges or fresh water because they got all the vitamin C they needed synthesized in their own livers, and they got all their hydration straight from the blood and tissue of the rats they were eating.
It's amazing.
They were perfectly designed for months at sea.
It's a phenomenal biological advantage. They didn't require extra rations from the crew. They were self-sustaining pest control machines. And from those Phoenician ships, the spread became exponential.
Where'd they go next?
Well, the Roman Empire later recognized their value and brought cats deep into Europe alongside their legions. This was largely to battle the influx of the black rat, Rattus rattus, which was spreading disease and destroying grain along Roman supply lines. Later still, the Vikings took a real liking to cats.
The Vikings. Really, I didn't picture a fierce Viking raider sitting with a purring cat.
Oh, absolutely. They used them on longships for the same reasons as the Phoenicians. Interestingly, the Vikings seemed to strongly favor orange cats.
Wait, orange cats specifically?
Yeah. By analyzing modern feline genetics, scientists can literally trace the genetic footprint of orange tabby cats from the Mediterranean basin all the way up into northern Europe, perfectly tracking along established Viking trade routes.
That is so cool.
And eventually, European colonists and explorers brought these felines across the Atlantic to the Americas and eventually all the way to Australia.
So they spread all over the world.
Yeah.
And as they spread, they became isolated in different geographic pockets, which leads us to a concept called genetic drift.
Yes.
Because for the longest time, the sources say all domestic cats basically look exactly like the North African wildcat. They had that classic mackerel pattern, the thin vertical tiger stripe.
Right. Genetic drift is a fascinating phenomenon. It happens when a small population of animals gets isolated from the larger group. Without new genetic material constantly flowing in from outside, any spontaneous genetic mutation that pops up can quickly take hold and permanently change the look of that isolated population.
Give me an example.
For instance, the cats that were brought to Asia and isolated there over thousands of years developed the distinct, slender bodies, wedge-shaped heads, and pointed coloration that we now associate with breeds like the Siamese.
Oh, I see.
But perhaps the most mysterious genetic shift happened much later in Europe.
The blotched tabby. I loved reading about this.
Yes. For thousands of years, the mackerel stripe was the only tabby pattern. Then, suddenly, in the 14th century, right around the time of the Ottoman Empire, a spontaneous mutation occurred that created the blotched or classic tabby.
The swirly one.
Exactly. This is that marbled, swirling world pattern you see on the flanks of many modern cats. What's bizarre from a genetics standpoint is that this blotched pattern is a recessive gene. That means both parents must carry the gene for a kitten to look blotched.
And usually recessive traits don't take over a population unless they offer some massive survival advantage, right?
Exactly. But we can't figure out any survival advantage to having swirls instead of stripes in a European alleyway. Yet this blotch pattern spread like wildfire, quickly outpacing the ancestral mackerel stripes in many populations.
Why did it happen?
We still don't definitively know why it was so incredibly successful. It might simply be that humans found it uniquely pretty and preferentially fed or kept those cats, accidentally selecting for the gene.
It's incredible. We took this highly specialized, highly lethal predator, and we just sprinkled them all over the globe like confetti.
Which brings us to a very sobering reality. When you connect all this historical movement to the bigger ecological picture, the global spread of the cat was essentially humans weaponizing a predator for our own agricultural and maritime convenience.
Right.
We took a perfectly engineered, opportunistic hunter and dropped it into brand new, extremely fragile ecosystems worldwide, places like Australia, New Zealand, or isolated islands where the native wildlife, especially birds and small marsupials, had absolutely no evolutionary history or natural defenses against a mammalian predator of that caliber.
It's a disaster for them.
It was a utilitarian, practical decision for humans at the time, but it has resulted in massive, devastating ecological ramifications today.
And the exact reason they're such a massive, devastating ecological force is because of the physical anatomy they perfected millions of years ago in those ancient forests. Let's look under the hood at this perfect predatory chassis.
Let's do it.
Because the stats on a cat's skeleton are just mind-blowing. Let's start with the bones. Humans have 206 bones in our bodies. A cat, which is a fraction of our size, can have up to 244 bones. Where are they hiding all the extra parts?
The vast majority of that extra bone count is located in their spine and tail. A cat has 52 to 53 vertebrae compared to our 32 to 34.
That's a lot of extra joints.
It is. This incredibly high number of vertebrae, combined with extremely thick, elastic intervertebral discs and highly mobile joints between each individual bone, gives them unparalleled flexibility. Their spine isn't just a rigid support column like ours, it's a dynamic spring.
And then there's the collarbone, or rather the distinct lack of one.
Exactly. In a human skeleton, the clavicle or collarbone is a sturdy strut that firmly connects the arm to the rest of the skeleton at the sternum. It provides structural stability.
Right.
In cats, the clavicle is vastly reduced to a tiny vestigial sliver of bone, and crucially, it is completely free-floating. It's buried in muscle and doesn't articulate or connect with any other bones at all.
I was trying to visualize this, and I keep coming back to a sports car analogy.
Okay.
If a cat's body is a high-end, custom-built sports car, that free-floating collarbone is like an advanced independent suspension system. Because the front legs aren't rigidly attached to the skeleton, the shoulder blades can move incredibly freely.
That's a perfect analogy. That independent suspension is what lets them squeeze through impossibly tiny gaps. Basically, if a cat's whiskers dictate that its head can fit through a hole, the shoulders can just collapse inward and follow right through.
Because there's no collarbone to block them.
Exactly. There's no bony collarbone to block them. And when they are running, that lack of structural attachment allows the front legs to reach significantly further forward, drastically lengthening their stride for maximum top speed.
So the collarbone is the suspension, and the spine is this highly flexible aerodynamic chassis.
And that flexible chassis is the absolute secret behind the famous riding reflex. We've all seen a cat fall from a tree or a wall, and somehow, seemingly miraculously, land perfectly on its feet.
Yeah, it always looks like magic.
It looks like magic, but it's an astonishing feat of physics and anatomy.
Can you break that down for me? What is actually happening in the half second they are falling?
It starts internally, in the inner ear, specifically the vestibular apparatus, which detects the fall and the body's orientation in a fraction of a millisecond.
Okay.
The cat instantly relies on visual cues to twist its head to face the ground. Now, because the collarbone is free-floating and the spine has those 53 highly mobile vertebrae, the cat can do something humans can't. It can twist the front half of its body completely independently of its back half.
Oh, wow.
By manipulating the conservation of angular momentum, tucking its front paws close to its body to rotate the front fast, while extending its back legs to slow the rotation of its rear, it flips over in midair.
Just so precise.
Once the front is facing down, it reverses the process, extending the front paws and whipping the back legs around. Finally, it completely arches that flexible spine to act as a massive shock absorber and lands. All of this can happen from a drop of just 12 inches in a matter of seconds.
That is just wild. It's built-in anti-gravity. And once they are actually on the ground, their locomotion is just as specialized. You mentioned earlier that they are digitigrade, walking on their toes for stealth. But the sources also mentioned they have a very specific way of walking called a pacing gait.
Yes. When a cat is just walking normally, patrolling its territory or stalking, it moves both legs on one side of its body simultaneously.
Like the right side, then the left side.
Exactly. So it moves the right front and right back legs forward together, then shifts its weight and moves the left front and left back together. Camels and giraffes are among the very few other animals that walk this way.
Why do cats do it? It seems off balance.
It's actually an incredibly smooth, energy-efficient way to move, but more importantly for a predator, it allows for exact silent foot placement. When a cat uses a pacing gait, it can place its back paw almost precisely into the exact footprint just vacated by its front paw.
Oh, that's smart.
If the front paw didn't snap a twig or rustle a dry leaf, the back paw won't either. It's vital for staying completely silent while navigating dense underbrush. But when they need speed, they abandon the pace and shift into a full asymmetrical gallop.
And that's where the spine comes into play again, right?
Exactly. In a gallop, the extremely muscular hind legs plant simultaneously to provide explosive forward propulsion, thrusting the body into the air. The flexible spine extends fully. Then, the front legs land to act mostly as shock absorbers and brakes, while the spine flexes inward, bringing the back legs forward to plant ahead of the front paws for the next massive leap.
And once that leap connects and they catch their prey, we have to talk about the teeth. Because earlier you mentioned meiosis and the carnassial shearing teeth. Cats don't chew their food like we do they?
Not at all. Cats are what biologists call obligate hypercarnivores. They have absolutely no biological mechanism to digest plant matter. They must eat meat to survive. Because of this, their mouths are highly minimized for efficiency. A dog, which is an omnivore, has 42 teeth for ripping and grinding. A cat has only 30 teeth, and their jaw is essentially a simple hinge joint. It only moves strictly up and down.
So there's no side-to-side chewing motion, like cows or even people do.
Zero side-to-side motion because they don't grind grain or leaves. They use their long canine teeth, which are loaded with sensitive nerves, to find the gap in the vertebrae to deliver a precise, lethal bite, usually severing the spinal cord of their prey.
Wow, precision strike.
Once the prey is dead, they use those specialized carnassial teeth along the side of the jaw. They tilt their heads and shear the meat into chunks just small enough to swallow whole. The stomach acids do the rest. Their entire mouth is designed exclusively for killing and rapidly dismantling meat.
Which brings us to the final piece of the sports car analogy.
Yeah.
The tires. Or in this case, the claws.
The claws are a marvel of bioengineering. They are made of keratin, much like our fingernails, and as we discussed with Proilurus, they're usually kept retracted.
Hidden away.
Yes. They sit comfortably sheathed inside the skin of the toes, which keeps them razor sharp because they never touch the ground. When the cat needs them, powerful tendons attached to the toe bones contract, pulling the claws forward and locking them into place. But crucially, these claws are strongly curved inward, like sickles.
And that curve is what makes them such phenomenal climbers, right? They act like built-in grappling hooks.
Precisely. They can scale a vertical tree trunk with immense speed because every time they swipe, the downward force of their weight pulls those hooks deeper into the bark.
But the curvature is a one-way street. I always wondered about this because my childhood cat was constantly getting stuck on the roof of our house.
Oh, classic.
It could fly up the trellis, but then it would just sit there crying until my dad got the ladder.
That is entirely because of the claw curvature. The hooks point backward toward the cat's body. They are absolutely perfect for going up. But if a cat tries to climb down head first, the curve is pointing the wrong way. The claws will just slip right out of the bark. That's why you often see cats stranded high in trees or having to awkwardly, nervously reverse their way down a trunk tail first. They literally cannot climb down head first safely.
Okay, so we have established this absolutely perfect physical chassis. The bones, the teeth, the claws. But a high-performance sports car is utterly useless if the driver can't see the road.
Good point.
A cat's body relies on a flawless, hyper-tuned sensor array to guide it. Let's talk about how cats actually experience the physical world, starting with their vision.
A cat's vision is beautifully, specifically adapted for crepuscular hunting. That means they are most active at dawn and dusk, those twilight hours when their natural prey mice, rabbits, small birds, are also emerging to feed.
So low light conditions.
Exactly. To see clearly in that dim light, their retinas have evolved to have almost 3 times more light-absorbing rod cells than human eyes.
Rods are the ones that detect light and shadow, not color, right?
Correct. Cats sacrifice vibrant color vision. They mostly see muted blues and greens in exchange for hypersensitive motion and light detection. But the real secret weapon of their night vision is something you've probably noticed if you've ever shined a flashlight in the yard at night.
That crazy glowing eye shine. The tapetum lucidum.
Yes. The tapetum lucidum is a highly reflective mirror layer that sits completely behind the retina. In a human eye, any light that passes through the retina and isn't absorbed by the photoreceptors is just loss.
It just hits the back of the eye and that's it.
Right. But in a cat's eye, that light passes through the retina, hits the tapetum lucidum, and literally bounces back through the retina a second time. It gives the photoreceptors a second chance to absorb the photons. It vastly increases their ability to see in near total darkness.
But wait, if their eyes are that incredibly sensitive to picking up every single stray photon of light, what happens at high noon on a sunny day? Wouldn't that much sensitivity blind them?
It absolutely could damage their retinas, and that is exactly why they evolved slit pupils. A human's round pupil can only constrict so far to block out light, but a vertical slit can close much, much more tightly, almost completely shutting out the glare while still leaving a tiny pinhole of light for them to see through.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It protects their delicate night vision sensors during the day.
Now let's talk about their hearing, because the numbers here are equally absurd. Humans can hear up to about 20 kilohertz. A dog, which is famously good at hearing high pitches, can hear up to maybe 45 kilohertz. A cat, 65 kilohertz. They're literally hearing ultrasonic frequencies.
They absolutely have to in order to survive. They need to hear the incredibly high-pitched squeaks, the rapid heartbeats, and the subtle rustling of mice hidden deep in dry grass.
They can hear a heartbeat.
Yes, their hearing is that good. And it's not just the immense range of their hearing, it's the astonishing directional accuracy.
These are the shape of the ears.
Yes, the outer ears, called the pinnae. Think of them as independently operated satellite dishes. A cat's ear is controlled by more than 24 tiny, highly complex muscles.
Wow.
This allows them to pivot and rotate their ears 180 degrees, completely independently of one another. A cat can sit perfectly still in total darkness, and just by rotating its ears to catch the sound waves, it can pinpoint the exact location of a rustling mouse within a fraction of an inch.
That brings us to their sense of touch. And when we talk about a cat's touch, it isn't just about their skin or paws, it's primarily about the whiskers.
Yes, the whiskers.
The mystatial vibrissae on their muzzle. The sources make a huge point of emphasizing that these are not just thick hairs.
Not at all. Calling them hairs is doing them a disservice. They are deeply embedded, highly sophisticated sensors. The root of a whisker is embedded 3 times deeper into the facial tissue than normal fur, and the base of the follicle is absolutely packed with sensitive nerve endings.
So they use them to measure gaps, right? Like,
Yeah.
Can my body fit through this fence?
They do use them for measuring spatial dimensions, but they are far more sensitive than that. A cat's whiskers are so attuned that they can detect minute changes in air currents.
Air currents, really?
Yes. If a cat is walking down a hallway in pitch blackness, the air its body displaces will bounce off a solid object, like a wall or a chair, and bounce back. The whiskers detect that incredibly subtle shift in air pressure, allowing the cat to feel the object and navigate around it without ever physically touching it.
That's like radar.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of their sense of touch, there was a specific fact in Dr. Brown's book that honestly blew my mind, and I need you to explain it. It's about temperature.
Okay, yeah.
Humans feel pain from a hot surface when it hits about 112 degrees Fahrenheit. You touch something that hot, your nerves scream, you pull your hand away. But a cat's heat threshold is incredibly high. They don't register pain from heat until the surface hits 126 degrees Fahrenheit.
That is absolutely correct.
Does this biological quirk explain why I have repeatedly caught my cat practically roasting itself on my laptop charger?
Oh, definitely.
Or why cats will sleep on scalding hot radiators, or literally curl up on a stovetop that was just turned off until their fur is practically singeing? I always thought my cat was just being stubborn, but you're telling me it literally couldn't feel the heat.
It couldn't feel the pain of the heat, no.
Yeah.
You have to remember their evolutionary origins. Their ancestors, Felis libica, were desert-dwelling animals accustomed to intense baking heat on the sand and rocks.
Right, the desert.
Their thermoreceptors just don't trigger a warning pain response until the temperature reaches a level that would be dangerously agonizing to a human. It's a physiological blind spot when you place them in a modern human home with artificial heat sources.
That is fascinating. And it leads to another really interesting point in the readings about their sensory network. The sources suggest that because their senses are so specialized, if one sense fails due to genetics or injury, the others will radically hypercompensate.
Yes, and the classic example of this is seen in deaf white cats.
Right.
Yeah.
What exactly is happening there genetically?
There is a specific dominant genetic mutation, the W gene, that causes a cat to have a pure white coat and often striking bright blue eyes. But this same gene is pleiotropic, meaning it affects multiple systems.
Oh, I see.
It often causes a severe malformation in the inner ear during development, leading to profound congenital deafness. So, these deaf white cats lose their primary hunting sense entirely. They can't hear a mouse, they can't hear a predator.
But they don't act helpless at all.
Exactly. Because their other senses adapt to fill the void. Their sense of touch, in particular, becomes profoundly, remarkably sensitive. They rely heavily on something called Pacinian corpuscles.
What are those?
These are specialized vibration receptors clustered in their hairless paw pads. A deaf cat can't hear you walking up behind them, but they can literally feel the minute vibrations of your footsteps or the hum of a door opening transmitted through the floorboards straight into their paw pads.
So they feel the sound.
They essentially hear through their feet, perfectly compensating for their lack of auditory input.
That is like an actual superpower. Speaking of superpowers,
Yeah.
it brings us to the final sense, which is honestly the strangest one. Their sense of smell. And specifically, I want to talk about the vomeronasal organ.
Ah, yes. Also known as Jacobson's organ. This is an entirely separate olfactory system. It's not in the nose. It's located up inside the roof of the cat's mouth, just behind the front teeth.
Wait, in their mouth.
Yeah. While a cat's nose is used for smelling everyday things like food or smoke or predators, the Vomeroni organ is dedicated entirely to tasting social scents. Specifically, it decodes complex chemical pheromones left behind in the urine or cheek rubbings of other cats.
This explains something every cat owner has seen. It's when they sniff something, maybe another cat's bed or a visitor's shoes, and then they make that hilarious tranced out face.
Yes.
Their mouth hangs half open, their lip curls back, their eyes glaze over, and they just freeze for 10 seconds.
Yes, that posture is called the Fleeman response. It looks comical to us, but they are performing intense chemical analysis.
What do they actually do?
By dropping their jaw and curling their lip, they are actively drawing air and heavy scent molecules past their teeth and pumping them up through tiny ducts into the vomeronasal organ. It's how they read the neighborhood bulletin board.
That's so weird.
They're decoding who was there, how long ago, what their reproductive status is, and whether they were stressed or calm.
So there are these perfectly tuned, independent, solitary hunters walking around reading invisible chemical bulletin boards just to avoid bumping into each other in the wild. But that raises a massive question.
Okay, what is it?
If they're so hardwired for solitary territorial independence, how on earth do they mentally adapt to living in our noisy, chaotic, crowded human homes, often forced to share space with 3 other cats, a golden retriever, and a toddler?
It's a brilliant question, and to understand this mental flexibility, we have to look closely at Dr. Sarah Brown's incredible field studies. Before she was writing books about house cats, she was a young, dedicated researcher spending years out in the field observing feral cat colonies. She wanted to know exactly how these solitary animals navigate social structures when forced together.
I loved reading her notes from this era. They are so vivid. She spent a lot of time observing a feral population at an old, sprawling Victorian psychiatric hospital in England, right?
Yes, exactly.
It had basically become a dumping ground where people would just abandon their unwanted pets. These abandoned cats bred, and over several generations, the population living on the hospital grounds became entirely feral. They were wild animals living parallel to the hospital staff.
Exactly. And she kept incredibly detailed logs on the individual personalities of these cats.
There was one specific cat in her notes she called the electrician's cat, which was famous on the grounds because, as she noted in all capital letters, it hates women.
Yes, I remember that one.
It would only accept food from the male electrician. But she eventually focused her study on a specific colony living in a sheltered courtyard to see how they structured their society.
What she observed there fundamentally changed how we view feline socialization. She found that while cats are naturally solitary hunters, they don't pack hunt like wolves, they are remarkably socially adaptable.
How so?
If there is a concentrated, reliable, abundant food source in this case, the hospital staff regularly leaving out large piles of food scraps, the cats will suppress their natural territorial hostility. They will form a cooperative, matriarchal colony.
Oh, wow.
The females will even share nursing duties for each other's kittens.
But the key observation, the thing that explains how a cat can live in a human house, was how the kittens in these colonies developed their personalities.
Okay.
And this brings us to what might be the most critical concept in all of feline psychology, the sensitive period.
The sensitive period is everything. It is a highly specific, rapidly closing window of neurological development. For a kitten, this window opens around 2 weeks of age and slams firmly shut around 7 weeks of age.
5 weeks, that's it.
That is the entire window. If a kitten does not have positive, gentle, physical interaction with a human being during that specific 5-week window, its brain literally hardwires to classify humans as dangerous predators.
So there's no going back.
It will grow up to be a completely unapproachable, deeply fearful, feral adult.
Yeah.
And you cannot easily reverse it. You cannot simply tame a cat by being nice to it once that neurological window has closed.
Dr. Brown talks about another colony she helped relocate from a schoolyard, which involved a massive, battered, battle-scarred tomcat the staff had named Big Ginger.
Oh, yes.
I felt so bad for Big Ginger reading that.
It's a tragic example. Big Ginger had completely missed that socialization window as a kitten. He was fundamentally terrified of people. Even after months of care in a shelter, he would literally panic and run vertically up the walls and across the chain-link ceiling of his enclosure just to escape the mere presence of a human looking at him.
That's looking at him.
Yes, his brain was permanently wired for terror.
But the genetics still play a role in this, right? It's not just environmental exposure. Even if the father cat isn't around to raise the kittens, His genes dictate how easily that socialization happens.
Absolutely. The tomcat plays absolutely zero role in rearing the kittens. He vanishes after mating. But he passes down crucial behavioral genetics. Studies show that a kitten's inherent temperament, specifically whether it lies on the spectrum of naturally bold or naturally shy, is heavily influenced by the father's genes.
So how does a bold gene interact with that 5-week sensitive window?
A genetically bold kitten is naturally curious. It is much more likely to wander out of the nest and proactively approach a human foot or hand during that 2 to 7 week window. By initiating contact, it successfully socializes itself.
And a shy kitten.
A genetically shy kitten, however, will naturally hide at the back of the nest. It needs much more proactive, intentional, gentle handling by humans to overcome its natural timidity before the window closes.
And crucially, the way we humans act around them matters immensely too. The Psychology Today article we reviewed broke this dynamic down perfectly. It highlighted studies showing that cats absolutely can tell the difference between humans, and they strongly prefer their owners over strangers.
Yes, they absolutely have favorites.
But it also pointed out how different demographics of humans interact with cats and why cats react the way they do.
The demographic differences in human-cat interaction are fascinating.
They noted that women, generally speaking, tend to get down on the floor, on the cat's physical level, and speak softly. Cats love this. It's non-threatening.
Right?
Men, statistically, tend to stay seated in a chair and expect the cat to navigate up to them to be petted. And children. The article noted that children usually spot a cat and just rush straight at it with their arms out.
Which is terrifying for the cat.
Right. If you think about it from the cat's perspective, is exactly the behavioral profile of a predator attacking. So the cat instantly bolts under the sofa. Adults usually wait quietly and let the cat initiate the contact on its own terms.
It perfectly illustrates how miscommunications happen in the home. We constantly expect cats to act like dogs. We expect them to eagerly accept our clumsy affections. But they are operating on an entirely different social manual based on consent and subtle body language.
Let me see if I have this whole domestication and socialization concept right, because it's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Let's say I have a wonderfully friendly, affectionate house cat. We'll call her Molly.
Okay, Molly.
Molly sleeps on my chest every night. She purrs loudly. She greets me at the door. She absolutely loves humans. Now, if Molly accidentally gets lost outside, wanders far away, and has a litter of babies in an abandoned barn, and absolutely no humans find them for 2 months, will Molly's babies become completely wild, untouched feral cats like Big Ginger, even though their mom is a sweet, human-loving house cat?
Yes, they absolutely will. They will be as wild as a raccoon. And that hypothetical perfectly encapsulates the incredibly fragile link of feline domestication. The genetic capacity to be friendly is there in those kittens it was passed down from Molly's lineage, but the actualization of that friendliness requires a specific environmental trigger: human handling during that tiny, sensitive period.
It's just a tiny window.
It is a razor-thin dance between nature and nurture. A dog is born genetically hardwired, wanting to look at a human face. A cat has to be painstakingly taught that a human face is safe before it turns 2 months old, or the ancient wild instincts lock firmly back into place.
That is just, it's haunting in a way. The wildness is never gone. It is always right beneath the surface, just waiting to click back into place the moment we step away.
Exactly.
Which brings us to our final section, modern felines. We've traced their journey from the ancient forests to the granaries of Egypt to the modern living room. So what does the life of the fully integrated domestic cat look like today, considering everything we know about their biology?
Well, statistically speaking, the feline world today is wonderfully diverse, but highly uniform in origin. The vast majority of pet cats, somewhere between 92% and 96%, in places like the US and the UK, are what the British affectionately call moggies.
Just mixed breeds.
Right, they are random bred cats. They aren't specifically curated by human breeders. They choose their own mates in the neighborhood. Only a tiny fraction, maybe 4% to 8%, are acquired from professional breeders.
But even though it's a small percentage, looking at that population of purely bred cats really highlights how incredibly malleable cat genetics can be when humans do decide to strictly interfere and selectively breed. We talked earlier about natural mutations, but breeders capitalize on them. Take polydactyly, for instance.
Ah, yes, the famous Hemingway cats. Polydactyly is a genetic mutation that causes a cat to be born with extra toes on its paws. Some of them look like they are wearing massive mittens or like they have little opposable thumbs.
They're so cute.
Author Ernest Hemingway famously kept a colony of them in Key West, and their descendants are still there.
And then you have breeds like the Selkirk Rex, which honestly looks like a mistake at a hair salon. It has this incredible, thick, curly hair that looks exactly like a sheep's fleece.
It's a very unique look.
The sources noted this was caused by a spontaneous dominant mutation that occurred in a rescue cat in Montana, and breeders specifically isolated it to create a whole new curly-haired breed.
It's fascinating from a genetic standpoint, but our artificial interference comes at a very steep, often tragic cost. When we decide to breed animals purely for extreme aesthetic physical traits because we think it looks cute or unique, we almost always breed for compromised health.
Like the flat-faced cats.
Exactly. Take the brachycephalic breeds like the modern show Persian. Over the decades, we've intentionally bred their faces to be so incredibly flat that their muzzles essentially cave inward.
Yeah, they look like they hit a wall.
Because of this, their jaws don't align properly, making it difficult for them to chew normal food. Their tear ducts overflow constantly because the skull structure is too compressed to allow proper drainage, and they suffer from severe chronic respiratory issues because their nasal passages are crushed.
It's heartbreaking. And the sources also mentioned issues with the giant breeds like the Maine Coon.
Yes, the Maine Coon is a massive, incredibly beautiful, rugged breed. But because the foundational gene pool was restricted to achieve a specific look, the breed now suffers heavily from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM.
What does that do?
This is a dangerous genetic condition causing a thickening of the heart muscle, leading to sudden heart failure in young cats.
Knowing what we know now, having just spent this entire hour marveling at how perfectly evolution designed the cat's skeleton, its flexible spine, its specialized muscles over 60 million years of survival, it really forces a tough question. Are we committing a fundamental ethical wrong by artificially breeding them for shortened, stubby limbs like the Munchkin breed just because we think it looks cute scrolling through Instagram?
It's a fair question.
We are taking a perfectly engineered predator and disabling its chassis for likes.
It raises a vital question about our modern relationship with them. We took a creature perfected for explosive leaping, agility, and survival, and we are mutating it for aesthetics. But the modern challenges don't stop at genetics. They also extend to how we house them.
How so?
Because, largely to protect local, vulnerable wildlife populations from this highly efficient, weaponized predator we've introduced everywhere, we are increasingly transitioning cats into strictly indoor-only environments.
Which, to be clear, is significantly safer for the native birds and vastly safer for the cats themselves, given the modern realities of cars, diseases, and urban predators like coyotes.
Absolutely safer.
But locking them inside creates a completely new psychological problem.
Yeah.
Profound, soul-crushing boredom.
Precisely. You have taken an apex predator armed with hypersensitive whiskers, ultrasonic hearing, and muscles coiled for a 10-foot vertical leap, and you have trapped it inside a static, quiet, two-bedroom apartment.
It's just not enough space.
That is a recipe for severe behavioral issues, obesity, and depression. And that is exactly where the concept of environmental enrichment becomes vital.
The review we read on the Danteisms conservation blog highlighted some absolutely fantastic ways to stimulate these indoor cats. And it stressed that enrichment is not just about throwing a plastic ball on the floor, it's about deeply stimulating their specific biology.
Right. They heavily suggest using olfactory enrichment to stimulate that incredible sense of smell we discussed. We all know about catnip, which contains nepidlactone and triggers that euphoric rolling response.
Oh yeah, cats go crazy for it.
But the blog pointed out that roughly 30% of cats lack the gene to even detect catnip.
Yep.
It does nothing for them.
But there are alternatives. They mentioned cat thyme, which can elicit a massive euphoric response even in cats that ignore catnip. Or valerian root, which has a pungent, almost sweaty sock smell to humans, but acts as a powerful stimulant that can energize a lethargic, overweight indoor cat to actually get up and run around.
Exactly. We have to work harder to simulate the hunting, climbing, and sensory challenges their wild brains still desperately crave. We need vertical spaces, puzzle feeders to make them work for their food like a hunt, and varied scents to read.
But what about the cats that aren't safely indoors? What about the millions of feral cats, the big gingers of the world who are still living in our alleys, behind restaurants, and in farmyards? We can't socialize them.
For those feral populations, the modern, scientifically backed humane approach is TNR, trap, neuter, return.
How's that work?
Instead of the old ineffective method of trapping and euthanizing ferals, which just creates a vacuum that new ferals immediately move into shelters trap them, they humanely sterilize them, vaccinate them against rabies, tip one of their ears so they can be identified from a distance, and then return them to their exact territory.
So they just live out their lives outside, but they can't reproduce.
Exactly. It stabilizes the local colony population, prevents millions of unwanted kittens from dying of starvation or disease, drastically reduces the noise and stress of constant mating and territorial fighting, and allows these cats to live out their natural lives without contributing to the overpopulation crisis.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's a respectful, practical acknowledgement that these semi-domesticated animals exist in a permanent liminal space between wild and tame, and we have a responsibility to manage them humanely.
It is honestly just an incredible sweeping journey. When you step back and look at the whole picture, it's staggering. We started 60 million years ago with myices in the ancient humid forest. We watched Pseudolurus walk on its toes across massive continental land bridges.
A long trip.
We hung out in the grain silos of the Fertile Crescent while they negotiated their first human contracts. We hitched rides on Phoenician trade ships battling scurvy, and somehow, against absolutely all odds, we ended up with this purring, perfectly engineered 244-bone predator sleeping completely relaxed at the foot of our beds.
And yet, through all of that immense time and massive geographic upheaval, they remained so uniquely themselves. They adapted to us, they moved with us, but they never truly surrendered to us.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final fascinating thought to ponder.
Okay.
As human environments continue to drastically change, as we hyper-urbanize, as we pave over the natural world with concrete, and as wild spaces shrink globally, we are rapidly losing almost all of our large mammalian predators.
Yeah.
Lions, tigers, wolves, they're all being pushed to the extreme margins.
True.
But the domestic cat's unique, semi-domesticated adaptability, its unparalleled ability to thrive in a 30th floor high-rise just as easily as it thrives in a medieval barn, might make it the only apex mammalian predator that successfully manages to evolve right alongside us.
It's a profound thought. Thousands of years from now, in the sprawling steel and concrete megacities of the distant future, the domestic cat might be the very last living echo of the wild left by our side. A lethal, perfect predator that simply chose to stay.
Remember how we started this hour, talking about the blueprint of a dog and how clean and predictable human engineering is? The cat is living proof that sometimes nature absolutely refuses to be engineered. Sometimes the blueprint perfectly draws itself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Tonight, take a close look at the cat in your life, or the one roaming your neighborhood with a completely newfound sense of awe. Because you aren't just looking at a pet, you're looking at 60 million years of perfected, uncompromising survival.